Welcome to Parenthood Unscripted, where honest conversations about raising kids take center stage. I'm your host, Samantha Taylor, speech language pathologist, business owner, and mom of two. Each episode, I sit down with professionals and real parents to talk about the parts of parenting we don't always say out loud, the challenges, the growth, the joy, and everything in between. Whether you're looking for connection, perspective, or simply to feel less alone, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. If you're a parent who wants to feel more connected, supported, and less alone in this parenting journey, I'd love to invite you to our Instagram community. Over on Parenthood Unscripted, I share real conversations, behind the scene moments from the podcast, and honest conversations about raising kids, especially the parts we don't always say out loud. It's a space for perspective, encouragement, and connection with other parents who get it. Come join us. We'd love to have you there. I am so excited to welcome Melissa here with us today. She's a special education teacher with 10 years of experience in the field and over a decade of private Wilson reading instruction. She's also a mother of two young boys, both who have faced speech delays and medical issues. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say Melissa's been working with my son for, oh gosh, I think we're coming up on a year at this point. And to see the growth that he has made is tremendous. He's like a whole different person. Quick little backstory. He is a COVID kindergartner. So his kindergarten was literally on Zoom like 15 minutes a day. So he missed a lot of those foundational skills. And he's such a tremendous reader, but could not spell to save his life. So I was so excited when I got connected with Melissa because it has been such a game changer. He's spelling all the time now. He's spelling accurately, like he's able to correct things. So thank you.
Really happy to hear that. And he's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, he's a good kid. So diving right in, I want to know, can you tell me a little bit about you, your family, and the work that you do?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I'm a special education teacher. I've been in the field for about 10 years, primarily working with kids with mild to moderate disabilities. So, these are kids who are reading below grade level in math and reading, spelling, writing, also supported social skills group. And over the years, worked with a wide range of learners, anywhere from students with specific learning disability, but that's where dyslexia is classified under, language-based learning needs, communication needs, ADHD, autism, behavioral emotional challenges. I'm also a mom to two little boys, both 5 and under. And in the very small pockets of time that I have outside being with my own kids, I've worked as a private Wilson reading instructor. And more recently, since moving to this area, I've started taking on additional students, which has been really meaningful way to stay connected to what I love doing while also balancing being a mom.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious because you've had experience in the schools, but now you're working with students kind of privately. What has that been like? What are um maybe some of the differences that you need or that you notice or some of the benefits of either placement?
It's a good question. I think in a school setting, when you have a caseload of 15 to 20 plus kids, there's only so much time in the day. And if in an ideal world, if I could see every child for an hour every single day, I would, but that's not always the reality. And sometimes, based on service needs and based on what your capacity is, you have to group according to like levels. And the groups are great, but it just is not as ideal. And again, in that ideal world, doing it in a private setting, I'm able to see you one on one. And small groups are great, don't get me wrong, but sometimes there is more benefit to having one on one. Kids' attention span is better. Kids' stamina is better. Sometimes, when you're in a small group, you're more distracted, you're not always as attentive as you would be if you're with one on one. And again, everybody is different, but sometimes those are the benefits of having that private flexibility versus being constrained to the times and the zones in a school setting.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way about speech. Being a former school-based SLP, it was a lot of small group settings, and it was beneficial, especially for like social pragmatic skills, kind of working on that. But in the grand scheme of things, how it worked out is that we ended up having kids that wanted to kind of chat with each other, or it would be, we wouldn't really be able to hone in on that child's specific needs as much as whereas in private speech therapy it is one-on-one, it is more specialized and more individualized, so we are really able to hone in on those things. So I see the same exact thing. There's definitely benefits to both, but I do love that individualized specialized instruction that you can get more so privately.
For sure.
So I want to know what first drew you to helping children with reading and dyslexia.
So when I first started out as a learning center in a K-5 school, a large portion of my caseload were students with developmental delays, language-based needs, dyslexia. And as a new teacher, which I think a lot of special educators can relate to, you either have no resources or you have resources, they're there, but you have no idea how to use them. And you have to be trainer certified in them. And so if I had, for example, a Wilson resource, which I did, it's only so helpful. I have a word list, I have sentences, but do I really know how to teach a child how to use it effectively? No, not unless someone teaches me. And so I had a fantastic mentor teacher who went through the practicum through my district, and she told me that she thought I should also would benefit greatly, and the students, especially that I worked with, would benefit from it. Best thing I ever did. It is one of my more passionate avenues of being in special ed is because the majority of kids that I've serviced fit this mold that need this explicit, systematic, structured phonics program. It is fantastic. I have helped so many kids on my caseload become confident readers, confident spellers, and just confident learners.
I love that. And I think it hits on an important point because a lot of times for parents, we realize our kids need extra support, whether it's in reading, spelling, writing, whatever it might be, but we don't know what to look for or we don't know what questions to ask. So what is kind of some of the distinguishing features between being Wilson certified versus just a general reading instruction they might receive in the classroom?
So there's tier to response, or sorry, response intervention triangle that you may or may not have seen, but you think of it as tier one is for everybody. It's what the general curriculum, and that differs based on what the district has. In former schools that I've worked in, foundations has typically been their reading curriculum, and a lot of times K1, 2 is when all that phonics is going. Once you're in 3, they don't really do phonics as much. It moves into word study. And so those are your primary years. Tier 2 is considered you need some help. And they target through, in my experience at least, schools have targeted kids who need some help with reading teachers. And reading teachers might use the general curriculum. They also might use a different curriculum to target whatever the skill may be, whether it's comprehension, whether it's word attack, spelling, whatever their group is, but it's typically done in a small group. Then you have tier 3. And so kids typically should be in a tier 2 no more than at least 2 years. If you're in a response to intervention group and you're making stagnant progress, you are not moving, that should tell you what's happening. The school should be looking and saying, this child is not making gains. We've been seeing this child from, 5 days a week for 30 minutes. What else do we do? And you reconvene the team, the teacher, the reading teacher, the principal, whoever else is involved with this child, and think about what next steps are. Because if response to intervention is not doing what it's intended to do, then it's really becoming a tier 3, which is a special education need. And typically, a lot of the children I received came from response to intervention. They were in a reading intervention group, whatever approach, instruction it wasn't working for them. And that tells you something has to shift, something has to change.
That's such an important distinction because I know as a parent, especially if we're charting territory that we're not familiar with, we get to tier two and then we don't know what our options are. So it can feel a little scary because we can see that our children need support, but then it's like, what now? What's next? So I love that distinction about the different tiers. Kind of pivoting to parenting, being a parent. I'm curious. You have two children, that you mentioned they're both under the age of 5, but what has surprised you the most about motherhood?
Think something that has surprised me most about motherhood is, ironically, how much my professional life has started to mirror my life as a mom. And I don't know how often that happens. In the sense that, here I was working in schools, working with kids, chairing their IEP meetings, writing IEP goals, telling families what supports are going to look like, telling families a progress, what the child's challenges are, how to work with them. And now here I am with two little boys of my own. And now the table literally has flipped in the sense that I'm on the other side. I have service providers working with my children, telling me about their progress, telling me about their areas of challenge, how to work with them. So it's just a very interesting, but very supported surprise in motherhood. And one, was I prepared for? In a way, I guess you could say yes, because I've been doing this as my job. But, when you're mom versus you're a special ed teacher, you have different hats on. And it hits harder to home when it's your own versus when you're working with somebody else's child, because it's easier, and your ability to work with someone else's child to say they're going to be okay, they're going to read. It takes time. When it's your own children, it's a little harder to kind of see through that a little bit.
Yeah. I completely relate to that as both a mother and the professional. So I know what it's like to sit at both sides of the table. And you're right, it does hit so much more close to home when it's your own child because I spend most of my waking time being that professional, reassuring the parents, having true confidence that their children are going to achieve these goals. But I also know what it's like to be the mom who's receiving that reassurance, who's questioning it, who has to have kind of blind faith because it's like, I don't see it quite yet, but I'm glad that you do. So I think being a mother, but then also having that special education or that education background adds such a unique perspective that allows us to really empathize with parents because we know what it's like to receive challenging news or to receive or see a child who isn't quite where we know they can be. So I I think I don't know, I think motherhood only kind of enhances who we are as professionals because we gain that perspective.
Absolutely.
So, and I'm curious, what is something about your experience as a mom that people don't always see or talk about?
So this one is pretty important to me, in the sense that, it's also part of the surprising part of motherhood is that, you know, how you think things will be, it never is. And sometimes for the good or sometimes for the worse. But for us and for myself specifically, it's the emotional weight that comes with navigating medical and developmental challenges as a parent, especially with two little kids. A lot of that experience is invisible to other people. On the outside, it looks like going to appointments, going to therapies, recovering, scars, progress. But behind the scenes, there is a constant level of worry. There's a constant amount of researching going on behind the scenes, second guessing yourself, comparing, consultations, trying to make the best decision for your child. And with speech development, especially, there often isn't just a clear roadmap. Oftentimes, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you go to your pediatrician at their 15-month mark. Oh, your child isn't saying X amount of words according to the CDC milestones. Up, you should go to EI. And yes, in a way, there's that direct map, call EI, wait for testing. Yes. But at the same time, there's no roadmap to say, am I making the right decision? Is EI the best route from an EI early intervention? Is that the best route for my child? should I pursue direct service? Should I pursue private speech? So in that way, it really falls on you. And unless you are a speech therapist, and even so, maybe you still feel like you're not making the right decision because you kind of know too much of this world. That's kind of how I feel, but in a different way. I'm a special educator, not a related service provider, but I know too much within the realm. And so I sometimes feel like, is that beneficial? Is this the right route? And so with that, those expectations have reminded me that children develop at their own timeline. And I think that is the most important thing, that they're going to talk when they're ready. They're going to walk when they're ready. They're going to not necessarily do it when you want them to do it, when someone else wants them to. It just has taught me to slow down, to celebrate the small wins, that it is huge wins really for you. But what most other people might consider small wins because their child has already gone past that milestone. And those small wins can just feel so incredibly big and important.
Yeah, yeah. I will say for me, time has been one of the greatest teachers because it allows me the opportunity to reflect back. Because especially with my older son, when he was younger, I can't tell you how many nights I was up till literally 3, 4 in the morning, deep diving on the internet, just getting more and more panicked because I had no idea how to help him, how to support him. And on the surface, going out and about, people had this assumption that I was a professional. I worked with children similar to my son, that I'm confident, I know what I'm doing, he's in good hands, all will be well. And it was like, if you only knew. So
Right. I
it,
think,
it yeah,
yeah, I think going with that is that, and I'm sure a lot of parents kind of in our world will understand, is that there's nothing harder than having your child labeled. It's terrible. It's ironic because this is my field. I am the one part of that team that you have to have your child labeled. It's terrible. Nobody wants to have your child labeled. From personal experience, not only is my child labeled medically with a condition, they're also said you are speech delayed at 15 months, which, I mean, they're babies. How are you speech delayed and labeling him as such when he is really just still developing? So professional to professional, that's a hard one to accept. And
mhm.
it's a hard one to wrap your head around because a label doesn't change your child. Your child is still perfect the way they are. Unfortunately, the way it has to be is a label is just so the professionals who are working with them, whether educationally or medically, know how to support them.
Mhm.
And from both realms, medically and educationally, it's been very challenging to accept that on both fronts because it just feels like a label. It feels like you're taking away who they are and you're just smacking on a label. And that's, nobody wants that for.
No, not at all. And yeah, in some ways it's beneficial, but in a lot of ways it's harmful, is that that label is the gatekeeper of services too.
Correct.
So
Right.
without that label, our children don't qualify for the supports
Right.
they need, which is really unfortunate because in a perfect world, it's just an identifier of what supports they may need. But in some ways, it does detract from who they are or how they're perceived. And we don't want that. And as you, like in your example, being labeled speech delayed at 15 months, that label carries a lot of weight. And you don't want that, especially as they're discovering who they are. You don't want to shape how they view themselves, their identity. So I think there's a time and a place for labels, but we have to be mindful of them as
Mhm.
well. And I love that you point out like every child does kind of develop on their own timeline. So obviously there's things that we look out for and things that we want to be aware of, but in the spectrum of like age expected, it's so wide. And then we have so many different things that kind of impact that. So pediatricians, well-meaning, they have this list of things that they follow. But I wish there was a little bit more education on the variability. So make those referrals, absolutely, because I am not a proponent of wait and see by any means. But offering that reassurance that, you know what, let's get a baseline. Let's kind of see what's going on with your child. We're not labeling anything, we're not indicating anything, but let's just get it checked out. Um, so that's something I've been really passionate about with anyone that I talk with. Like, let's keep in mind that we have a wide spectrum of age expected.
Right.
Um,
That label, different way, again, I think it's harder to be labeled medically than educationally, and it makes you wonder, what is this? How are we helping? And it doesn't define them. It is just there to help the professionals to help your child. And that's really all it is. If you didn't have it, they wouldn't know how to help,
yep.
or
Yep.
what strategies to use, what surgeries to use and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Similarly, both my boys are diagnosed with ADHD. And so in the classroom, it's great in terms of accommodations, things like that, like preferential seating, repetition of instructions, things like that. But it does have the stigma attached to it too. So there is kind of this negative connotation that my children kind of have to navigate and that us as a family have to navigate too. So it's like, yes, this is something that they have, but it's not who they are, kind of going
Right.
back to that.
And I will say, with working with so many kids with ADHD or with other disabilities, is that they, at some point, whether it's fifth grade or fourth grade or middle school, they become accountable and they say, yeah, my ADHD is what helps me as a learner. It's what makes me me. It's what makes me learn differently. And this is what I need. And there's a lot of growth that happens with that. They have an awareness, they have an accountability, and they start to advocate for themselves instead of needing mom, dad, teacher advocate for them. And that's the goal, is to let them be aware. It's essentially their superpower, their learning power. It's what makes them them, and it's what makes them unique.
Such an important point. And that's what in a previous episode I was talking with a woman about how deafness is a superpower. So it's like, yes, we might have challenges or whatever it may be, but we're all human. We all have challenges. We all
Of
have
course.
different ways of learning. So it's like, what positive thing can we gain from that? How is that supporting us? How is that helping us? So I love that. Kind of talking about like milestones, things like that. I'm curious, what are some signs parents often miss when their child is having difficulty learning to read?
I like this question also. I don't think parents miss anything intentionally. Parents, your child best. You know them better than anybody else. And learning to read, I like to think, is really a partnership between home and school. And so it's just as important for schools to be monitoring and looking out for those red flags, kind of what we talked about with tier two intervention. How long is the child in there? Are they making progress from fall to winter, winter to spring? And so again, goes back to that, if an approach or a support isn't working, the question should always be, what's next? What do we need to do? Don't just keep waiting for him or her to go into third grade to be in that response to intervention group. Start intervening now and get the right supports in place. I will say though, kids are very smart. Kids are very good at coping. They're very good at overcompensating to make it look like they can keep up, to make it look like they can do it. And kids are really good at doing this kindergarten, first, second. Then you start to see a breakdown in kids who are really struggling, because what happens is these coping skills, these overcompensating skills, they don't work anymore because now the grade level and the workload is a lot harder. And so their strategies that they once used to get by isn't working for them anymore. And that's when those red flags are more apparent to
Mhm.
parents or teachers. And so, other than those red signs is, you often see kids might have an aversion to reading. I hate it. I don't want to read. It's really kind of a constant fight. If it's not a fight or an aversion, you might have kids who are really trying to work at reading. It's slow, it's choppy. They're really trying to sound out a word that you think they should know at that grade level point. Trouble retaining sight words. So sight words like the or was or for are words I can't tap out. They have to be memorized, but they're so hard to hold on to in both reading and in spelling. Reading comprehension likely will be impaired, because if a child is working so hard at trying to decode a word, not only is your automaticity not there, you're not fluent, and therefore you have no idea what you're reading, so your comprehension is impacted also. A lot of times I see frequent letter reversals and also number reversals. BD is your typical one. But you'll also see it in nines. You'll see it, fives and threes, different numbers too. Naturally, with difficulty with spelling, reading and spelling go hand in hand. And so that's also an area to look for. And this one is not all the time, but it is pretty often a lot of handwriting challenges. Sometimes when kids are having a hard time with reading and spelling, handwriting is often really hard because they are putting so much effort into thinking about a word, thinking about the sound it makes, but they're also now trying to figure out how to make that letter. And when you add that extra layer of difficulty, there is so much working going behind the scenes with their brain that everything else is that much harder. So those are mainly the things to look for, and to constantly check in with your child's teacher and your child's team, and to constantly say, where's my data? Where's the child's data? Where are they reading? What were they doing? If the data shows improvement, that's a good thing. If the child is stagnant or minimal improvement, that's where you want to say, what's next?
Absolutely. And I'm also a huge proponent. Anytime you have questions or something doesn't feel right, ask those questions. Kind of anecdotally with my son, before he started working with you, I knew something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So we went the CSE route, trying to see if we could tease out exactly what was going on. And he qualified for nothing. For context, like I'd mentioned, he was a really strong reader, but could not spell it. He wasn't able to segment words. He knew the letter sound correspondence, but past that, he couldn't segment the sounds. He couldn't, like if we were working on spelling, he would miss sounds that were in the word. And so the school, because he's such a high academic achiever, they said, oh, it's just not important to him, or, oh, he's just lazy. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's it. There's something else going on. And since working with you, it is funny, because I've noticed his handwriting has improved significantly.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. We had Mother's Day, what was it, a week ago at this point, and he made me a card. And at first I was like, did you write this? Did someone else write this? Because it's so good. So I can attest to all of that, but it's just so, when in doubt, trust your gut. There are answers there. If you think there's something going on, it's worth exploring, and it's worth asking the questions until you figure
Yeah,
it out.
I think sometimes the word testing can deter families. What's wrong with my kid? There's nothing wrong with your kid. Your kid is great. Your kid is perfect. Your kid is smart. However, sometimes it's helpful I like to think of it as getting an entire picture of your child. Let's see what's going on. Oftentimes, if kids get tested in kindergarten or first grade, not lots, not all the time, but generally speaking, not lots is going on. The ante isn't up yet. The workload isn't picked up yet. You're still adjusting to school. You're still adjusting to curriculum and whatnot. It's really end of second, third grade where you're going to start to see things kind of fall apart, and there's more to measure them on, let's say. And so that is when you want to see, are they really struggling in reading? Are there really gaps? Is it fluency? Is it sight words? Is it comprehension? What is it? What about spelling? Writing is an umbrella term. There's so many parts of writing. Spelling is just one part of it. Is it editing? Is it thinking of a sentence? Is it organizing your sentence? And so if that is the route you go down after your child's been in response to intervention, it's not been improving, it's just a way to see what's going on and how can we move forward and best to target those.
Yes, definitely. And I want to know, what do you wish more parents understood about dyslexia and reading struggles?
I think more than anything is that, similar to what I had mentioned before, is kids develop at their own rates. Sometimes they just need time. And I've seen that both as a teacher and a mom. And I'll talk kind of about both. And in my experience, it's something about third and fourth grade. There's often a point where something clicks developmentally for kids. And I should specify, these are kids, who are on IEPs, not, in the general curriculum. And so it could be maturity, it could be confidence, it could just be an understanding of their own strengths and challenges. But it's not just about ability, it's really pace and it's the type of instruction. And so curriculum, as you know, can move very fast. And sometimes I don't know how aware parents are of how quickly curriculum does move in a school, in a classroom. Sometimes kids just need more time, more repetition, a deeper explanation of the why behind the skill that you're teaching. Sometimes in a classroom, a skill could take a week or 2 weeks, but in a learning center, that same skill might take a month, it might take 3 months. And it's constant repetition, it's constant practice, it's constant exposure and explicitly taught. And that's why the second part of this is the type of instruction matters so much. Kids with dyslexia or reading or spelling below grade level struggles, they really benefit from teaching that's explicit, systematic, multisensory. And when they get that along with the time that they need, that is when you start to see growth.
Yeah. And we touched on this, but I'm wondering, can you help parents who they realize their child's struggling and whether it's in parenting or reading, but they don't know where to begin? What kind of words of wisdom would you give them, whether they're noticing that they're maybe stagnant, or they are maybe in a situation like I was, where everything appears okay, but there's something that's just not clicking? What would you say to those parents?
I would get in touch with your son's or daughter's teacher, and I would start there, and I would raise your concern. If your child has never been in a response to intervention group, that would probably be the first route. If your child has been in it, not making progress, and you're receiving data and it's stagnant or it's still kind of the same flow, I would ask to get your child tested. I would request testing and say, I'm not seeing progress. I'm concerned that there is underlying challenges in reading and spelling. But it's more so around third grade. K1, 2, they're still developing. Not to say that these red flags don't show up there, but if you have concerns, trust your instincts. And if you want your child tested, that is the route that is always available to you. But you should always start with your child's teacher, as they also see your child day in and day out. They can kind of report on their reading along with whoever else is supporting them in that way.
Absolutely. And this has been such an incredible conversation, and I am so appreciative. Are there any final thoughts that you have for parents?
Yes. So, I think, you touched upon this, that the biggest thing is not to wait. That doesn't mean, my child's not reading this word right in this second. No, give them some time. They go to kindergarten, they're transitioning, they're learning new routines, new everything, meeting new people. But as you have conferences, as you have discussions, those are the things to kind of lean into. And if the biggest thing is not to wait, the earlier you understand something and what is going on, the sooner you could put the correct supports in place. If your kid is presenting with reading, spelling, has a formal diagnosis of dyslexia, you have to advocate to get them the right instruction. You ask your teacher, ask the specialist, are you certified? Are you trained in this program? What curriculum is my child receiving? They need instruction that is explicit, systematic, and multisensory. It is so important for these learners to get that.
That's such an important thing to end on. And I think one of the things that parents lose sight of sometimes when they're going through it is that they have that right to ask those questions, to advocate. And I think this has been so useful for parents. So I just want to thank you again for your time. And I want to know, where can people find you?
They can find me on my website. It's pittsfordreading.com. I have a contact form on it. You can feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and I'll link that right in the show notes. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Parenthood Unscripted. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with another parent who might need it. You can follow along on Instagram at Parenthood Unscripted for updates, clips, and future guest announcements. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you next time.